Rain didn't fall that day. It punished, like the sky itself knew the mistake she was about to make. Before we begin, I had to shorten parts of this story to get right to the point. No dragging, no fluff. So please, hit that like button, drop a comment, and share if this moves you. It helps YouTube push this story to someone who needs it right now. Now, let's begin. Her name was Soleil Alden, and on the day that was supposed to be the happiest of her life, she stood beneath. An arch of lavender roses soaked to the bone, mascara running, heart racing for all the wrong reasons. The wedding had started without him. The guests were seated. Cameras were poised. Music was cued. But Phoenix Barlow, the man who promised her forever, was nowhere to be seen. 35 minutes late, then 50, then over an hour. By the time he appeared at the garden gates of the Lexington Hotel rooftop, the rain had already ruined the linens and scattered half the crowd. He didn't rush. He didn't apologize. He strolled in with his tuxedo wrinkled, his tie loosened like a banker after a bar crawl, his eyes bloodshot, his breath tainted with cologne that wasn't his, perfume that wasn't hers. She looked at him through the veil and felt the first crack in her chest. But she smiled, because everyone was watching, because her aunt had flown in from Louisiana, because she'd already signed the catering bill, because sometimes heartbreak isn't a knife, it's a slow drip in front of a crowd. They said their vows. He mumbled his lines. She forced hers through a throat that felt like it was closing. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. The flashbulbs popped. Soleil signed her name with fingers that trembled. Inside the elevator to the penthouse, he didn't hold her hand. He didn't look at her. He was texting someone. She stared ahead, the hem of her once stunning dress soaked and stained. When they entered the suite, the door shut behind them with a heavy click. She turned to him, eyes hopeful, voice soft. "We're finally married." He blinked. Phoenix slowly turned to face her. And in the same tone someone might use to discuss the weather, he said, "You looked disgusting today." Soleil blinked, confused. "What?" "All eyes were on you." "And for what?" His voice got sharper. "Your hips have spread. Your face looks swollen. You're not the woman I proposed to. I married someone I can't even stand to look at." The silence swallowed the room. She stood frozen, lips parted, searching for something, anything to say. Then he stepped forward and slapped her. It wasn't the kind of slap that sent you flying. No, it was the kind that made you question your worth. It stung her cheek, but shattered something deeper. A part of her she hadn't even realized could still break. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She turned, and she walked. She locked the bathroom door behind her and leaned over the marble sink. Her reflection stared back, a bride with red cheeks, swollen eyes, and a dress that no longer fit the occasion. Then came the cramps, sharp, unforgiving. She clutched her stomach, fell to her knees, sweat cold on her back, her mouth open in a silent gasp. Blood. She reached for her phone. Phoenix didn't answer. The concierge found her in the hallway, collapsed. She was rushed to the hospital under another name. Not Mrs. Barlow. She refused that name. Doctors asked questions. She gave them silence. Then came the scan. The soft heartbeat. Then another. 2. She was 6 weeks pregnant. With twins. She lay in that cold room, eyes staring at the ceiling, while monitors beeped and nurses moved like shadows around her. Phoenix never showed up. He never called. He never knew. And right there, with tubes in her arms and betrayal heavy in her chest, she made a vow no one heard but herself. She would raise those babies. Alone. She would not be anyone's embarrassment, anyone's regret. She would not be what he said she was. She was Soleil. And this was the beginning of everything. The city buzzed below them. Neon signs flickered, taxis honked in frustration, and the skyline twinkled, like it didn't know a woman's soul had just fractured 30 floors above. Soleil sat alone on the cool bathroom tiles, back against the tub, wetting. Dress crumpled around her like a shell she couldn't crawl out of. Her cheek throbbed. Her stomach clenched. She didn't move, not for minutes, not even when her phone lit up with a missed call from the caterer, not even when the clock ticked past midnight. It wasn't the slap that destroyed her. It was that she saw it coming and still hoped he would stop. She replayed it in her head like a film reel. The dullness in his eyes, the hatred behind the words, and the sick twist of his mouth when his palm met her face. How had she ended up here? How did the girl who once dreamed of love stories and Parisian honeymoons now find herself bleeding in a 5-star suite with no one to call? Her hand pressed to her abdomen. More blood. Panic swallowed her. She stumbled to her feet, grabbed the edge of the sink and forced herself upright. In the mirror, her reflection was barely recognizable. Her makeup had streaked into tragic art. Her eyes, hollow. She moved fast after that, pulled a coat over her dress, slipped into flats, took the back elevator, avoided every mirror. Outside, she flagged down the first cab with working headlights. Where to? The driver asked, eyes flicking toward her damp dress. Hospital, she croaked. Please, hurry. The waiting room was cold, buzzing with quiet chaos. A man coughed across from her. A child cried. Somewhere, a vending machine clicked loudly. She sat, shaking, her hands gripping the hem of her coat. When the nurse called her name, she followed like a ghost. Tests were run. Questions were asked. When the ultrasound monitor lit up, she expected emptiness. But then, 2 flickers, 2 separate heartbeats. The text smiled gently. 6 weeks. You're carrying twins. Soleil's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Twins. She had imagined motherhood, sure. But not like this. Not now. Not after being told she was too much, too wide, too forgettable. She wrapped her arms around herself, not in celebration, but in defense, against a world that suddenly felt crueler than it had that morning. She left the hospital before sunrise, paperwork clutched tightly in her fist. The receptionist offered a car service. She declined. Instead, she walked. 14 blocks through lower Manhattan, still wearing her wedding dress, coat flapping behind her, breath fogging in the cold air. No one stopped her. No one asked. It was like she'd become invisible overnight. But deep inside, something stirred. Not rage, not heartbreak, something quieter, sharper, resolve. Back at the suite, Phoenix was gone. The bed was untouched. His luggage had disappeared. Only the crumpled tie he'd worn to the wedding was left hanging over the chair like a snake's skin. Soleil stood in the doorway and stared. Then she took off the ring and flushed it. 3 days later, she changed her last name back to Alden. She left the condo keys on the counter. She blocked his number, and she vanished from his world without a trace. No announcement, no drama, just silence. Because silence, she had learned, was more final than screaming. Over the next few weeks, the real descent began. Prenatal vitamins became her closest companions. Doctors asked if the father would be joining her for checkups. No, she said every time. When she broke the lease on her midtown loft, the building manager asked, "You sure? This place is rent-controlled." She nodded. "I need somewhere that doesn't remind me of him." She rented a 1-bedroom in Queens. Worked remotely with a friend from her design school days, sketching layouts for boutique brands. Anything to keep her afloat. The first ultrasound photos went into a shoebox under her bed. She couldn't look at them often. Not yet. But she kept them. That meant something. She stopped checking his social media after the first week. It only made her stomach turn. He had gone back to club appearances, real estate deals, and fashion week parties, like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, she woke up with nausea and uncertainty every morning, praying for strength, praying that she wouldn't crumble beneath the weight of 2 tiny heartbeats growing inside her. 6 months later, she gave birth in Brooklyn General Hospital. No family, no friends, no partner, just her. Nova came first. Wide eyes, tiny fists, silence. Luna followed, loud, pink, howling. Soleil laughed through tears, holding both girls to her chest, whispering promises she'd spend the rest of her life trying to keep. She left the hospital wearing sweats 2 sizes too big and a heart that was fuller than it had been in years. No announcements. No, it's a girl. Posts. Just her and her daughters. 3 souls rebuilding from the ashes of a wedding no one would ever speak about again. Brooklyn wasn't glamorous. The walls of her apartment were chipped. The heat groaned more than at work. The neighbors argued at volumes that rivaled car horns. But it was hers. It was theirs. Soleil Alden, once dressed in bridal lace, now wore spit-stained sweatshirts and midnight eye bags as if they were armor. Her daughters, Nova and Luna, had taken over her life in the most beautiful, chaotic way. Twin girls, born of pain, but raised in purpose. Nova, the quiet one, observed everything. She rarely cried. She'd sit by the window for hours, staring at people on the street like she was reading their minds. Luna, on the other hand, came into the world with a scream and didn't stop making noise since. She was bold, curious, and always the first to ask why. Their cribs were hand-me-downs from a donation center. Their clothes, mostly thrifted. Their food, homemade, because Soleil couldn't afford the luxury of prepackaged organic snacks. But they never lacked love. Soleil's day started at 4:30 a.m., the only time she had to sketch new designs before the twins woke up. From 6 a.m. it was diapers, cereal, spilled juice, and endless questions. By 8, she'd drop them off at the community daycare, only when she could afford it. Then came her hustle. She worked shifts at a boutique when she could get them, took on freelance design gigs at night, waited tables on weekends. Anything to keep food on the table and rent paid. She didn't have friends anymore, not because she didn't want them, because survival didn't leave room for brunches or phone calls. Most nights, she'd collapse into bed with one of the girls' feet in her ribs, a bottle cap in her bra, and a to-do list untouched on the kitchen counter. But when she closed her eyes and heard them breathing, she knew she'd do it all again tomorrow. One Tuesday morning, Soleil stood at the stove flipping pancakes that were more burnt than golden. Luna danced in the living room, wearing a superhero cape made from an old scarf. Nova sat at the kitchen table, quietly coloring the same star, over and over. "Mom?" Nova asked, not looking up. "Are daddies supposed to forget they have babies?" The spatula slipped from Soleil's hand. She bent down to pick it up, buying herself seconds to pull together the words that wouldn't destroy her child's world. She turned slowly and crouched beside Nova. "Some daddies forget," she whispered, brushing her daughter's curls away from her face. "The best ones, they choose you." Nova stared at her for a long beat, then nodded and went back to coloring. Soleil stood there for another moment, stunned by how a 5-year-old could slice her heart open with such an innocent question. After the girls left for daycare, Soleil sat by the window, holding her sketch pad, trying to draw. But all she could think about was what she had built, or rather, what she hadn't. No safety net, no retirement, no help, just her, 2 kids, and a monthly rent that didn't care about dreams. Sometimes she missed who she used to be, the girl who believed in silk gowns and Paris vacations. But that girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who had survived. Not just the slap, not just the birth, but every single day since. That afternoon, she walked into the small tailor shop where she sometimes picked up odd jobs. The owner, an elderly Haitian woman named Mrs. Delacroix, eyed her with motherly concern. "Too thin," she scolded gently. "You need to eat more. You disappear. Your babies cry." "I'll eat after I hem these skirts," Soleil replied, tying on her apron. "You're a designer, not a stitch girl. You shouldn't be working for scraps." "I'm a mother," Soleil said simply. "Scraps pay for milk." Mrs. Delacroix looked like she wanted to argue, but didn't. Instead, she handed over a pile of fabric and kissed her forehead. "You keep your fire, child. One day, it'll burn through the sky." Back at home that night, the electricity flickered twice before shutting off completely. Soleil lit a candle, boiled water on the gas stove, and told her girls they were having a camping night. They clapped, excited. Nova made shadow puppets on the wall. Luna sang nonsense songs until she fell asleep. Soleil watched them, heart aching, unsure if she should cry or laugh. Somehow, her daughters thought it was magic. They didn't see the overdue bill hidden under her sketch pad. They didn't hear her stomach growl from skipping dinner. They didn't know she stayed up until 2 a.m., sewing a ripped prom dress for a client who wouldn't pay until the weekend. All they saw was a mother who gave them love without limits. And that, Soleil reminded herself, was enough for tonight. It wasn't the long hours or sleepless nights that wore Soleil down. It was the quiet questions. The ones asked by tiny voices with big eyes. Questions that arrived like whispers, but settled in her bones like thunder. It started on a Wednesday morning. Luna had taken to sleeping sideways in the bed again, and Soleil woke up with a small foot pressed between her shoulder blades. She rolled out carefully, trying not to wake them, and tiptoed into the kitchen. Breakfast was a miracle made of scraps. 1 egg split between 2 toddlers. 2 slices of toast cut into quarters. She poured water into chipped mugs and called it apple tea. The girls sat at the table, still in pajamas, yawning. "Do you think daddies ever forget where their kids live?" Luna asked suddenly, between bites. Soleil froze at the stove. She turned, gently wiping her hands on a towel. Why would you ask that? Luna shrugged. Because we live here. And he never comes, Nova added quietly. Maybe he doesn't have our address. Soleil crouched beside them, her smile stitched from strength. Some people leave because they don't know how to love properly, but that's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. Then why don't we have a daddy? Luna whispered. Soleil touched her chin, lifting it gently. You have me, and you have each other. That's more than enough. It wasn't the first time they'd asked, and wouldn't be the last, but every time it carved a little deeper into her. She spent the rest of the day distracted. She spilled coffee on a client's sketch, forgot to pick up dry cleaning, missed a call from a potential job. By evening she was in the bathtub, still fully clothed, just needing a moment to breathe. The door cracked open. Nova tiptoed in, holding a blanket and a plastic unicorn. Can I stay with you? Soleil nodded, pulling her into the tub without water, letting them sit in silence together. Are you sad? Nova asked. Sometimes, Soleil replied. But I'm never sad because of you. Nova leaned her head against her. You're brave, Mom. She swallowed the lump in her throat. I don't always feel brave. You are anyway. The next day, Soleil took them to the park. A small one. A couple of broken swings, a rusted slide, and one old man who sold melted popsicles from a cooler. Luna climbed to the top of the monkey bars and shouted, Look, Mama, I'm higher than the pigeons. Soleil laughed. For a moment, she forgot everything. Then a man walked past, holding his daughter's hand. She was about Luna's age. He swung her into the air, and they both giggled as she landed on his shoulders. Soleil blinked hard and looked away. Nova was watching too. Later that night, Soleil pulled out her old vision board from under the bed. Years ago, it had photos of Paris, design studios, glossy magazine spreads. Now, it looked like a relic. She cleared the board, taped it clean, and started again. This time she added photos of Nova and Luna. Sticky notes with goals. Start my own line. Get a storefront. Save enough for private school. A list of people she wanted to meet. Black women CEOs. Single mothers turned founders. Designers with heart. And in the corner, a small sentence, scribbled like a vow. You may not have a father, but you'll always have a fighter. That weekend, she skipped taking any freelance orders. She didn't do laundry. She didn't answer emails. She took the girls to the science museum, packed a peanut butter lunch, and let them walk around with messy buns and mismatched socks. They stood under a giant replica of the solar system, Luna pointing at the biggest planet. That's you, she said, grinning, because you keep everything together. Soleil didn't know if she was Jupiter or just exhausted, but in that moment, she didn't care. She kissed their foreheads and thought to herself, if they never know pain like I did, I've won. That night, after the girls fell asleep curled up like commas in her bed, Soleil sat by the window with her sketch pad. She drew until her fingers cramped, not for clients, not for pay, but for herself. Bold lines, wild curves, dresses that looked like freedom, and suits that could hold power without apology. She imagined a runway, a crowd, her name in lights. And this time, she didn't flinch from the dream. It felt possible, because the questions her children asked didn't just hurt, they also lit a fire. And Soleil Alden was learning to answer them not just with words, but with action. The job wasn't glamorous. It never had been, but tips were better when she worked high-end events. And that night, the money mattered. Soleil wore a black shift dress that blended her into the background. Her curls were tucked into a low bun. Minimal makeup. No name tag. Just a tray in hand and sore arches from shoes one size too small. She had 20 minutes left on her shift. The rooftop was pulsing with music and egos. One of those exclusive charity galas where the rich toasted themselves and drank champagne that cost more than her rent. Soleil floated through the crowd, invisible. She'd gotten good at that, making herself unseen. A laugh exploded to her left, and a flurry of movement jolted her tray. She shifted quickly, stabilizing the glasses. No spills. Not tonight. She turned sharply toward the east end of the terrace, trying to circle behind a group of influencers posing by the fountain. And then, impact. A glass slipped. Champagne sloshed. A deep gasp. She turned just in time to see the golden bubbles cascading down the chest of a sharply dressed man in a navy tux. "Oh my God," she blurted. "I'm so sorry." He looked down at his soaked shirt, then up at her. A pause. Then, beautiful. Soleil blinked. I said, "You're beautiful," he repeated, a crooked smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. She stared. "I just spilled an entire glass of champagne on you. And you still look stunning doing it," he said, grabbing a napkin from the cocktail table nearby and blotting his shirt with easy grace. She reached out. "Let me." He gently took the napkin from her, not unkindly. "It's all right. Really." That's when she recognized him. Soren Vale. Tech mogul. Investor. Philanthropist. The man who'd once donated $10 million to rebuild hurricane-damaged schools in Louisiana. The one who was on the cover of Forbes last month. And she'd just christened him with Dom Perignon. She stumbled. "Soleil." He tilted his head. "Like the sun?" She gave a nervous chuckle. "Yeah." "Parents were dreamers. Good dreamers," he said smoothly. "It suits you. I really should get you a towel," she said, gripping the tray tighter. "Not unless you're coming with it." She looked up sharply. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't leering. He was warm. "I have 2 kids," she blurted, for reasons she didn't fully understand. He didn't flinch. "Then, I'd like to buy you coffee," he said. "And if the coffee goes well, I'd like to meet the 2 most important people in your world." She stared at him. This had to be a joke. She glanced around. No camera crew. No one laughing. "Are you serious?" "As a crash-proof server rack," he replied. Soleil blinked. "That's the nerdiest pickup line I've ever heard." "Glad you caught it," he said with a wink. "That was a test. You passed." Before she could respond, her supervisor was beside her, all sharp eyes and tighter tone. "Miss Alden, are you bothering the guests?" Soren turned toward the man. "Not at all. She's the only person here worth talking to." The supervisor stammered. "My apologies, Mr. Vale." Soren waved him off. "Relax. I'm not writing a Yelp review." The man disappeared quickly. Soleil exhaled. "You really don't have to. I want to." She studied him. No ring, no wandering eyes, just calm. "You don't know me," she said. "I'd like to." There was something disarming about how certain he was. She gave him a slow nod. "1 coffee," she said. "And if it gets weird, I'm blaming the champagne." "Fair enough." He handed her a business card and smiled. "Text me when you're ready." She slipped it into her pocket and walked away before her cheeks betrayed her. Back in the staff corridor, she pressed her back to the wall and let out a long breath. When she clocked out 20 minutes later, the first thing she did was check the card again, just to make sure it wasn't some hallucination, but it was real. Embossed, heavy cardstock, his name, title, and direct number. That night, as she tucked the girls into bed, Luna asked, "Why are you smiling weird?" "I'm not." "You are," Nova chimed in. "Did something good happen?" Soleil paused, brushing a curl from Nova's forehead. "Maybe." And for the first time in 5 years, she felt the whisper of a maybe that didn't make her flinch. She didn't text him that night, or the next. It took 4 days, 3 drafts and 2 deleted messages, before she finally sent, "Hi, it's Soleil. Coffee still on the table?" The reply came 2 minutes later. "Only if you're sitting across from me." They met at a quiet cafe tucked between a bookstore and a florist. No paparazzi, no attention, just the scent of ground beans and secondhand novels. Soleil arrived early. She wore jeans and a navy cardigan, hair loose around her shoulders. Simple, safe. Soren walked in 10 minutes later, holding a bag of pastries. "I didn't know your favorite," he said, placing the bag on the table. "So I brought 4. She raised an eyebrow. "4? He shrugged. "Options." They sat, ordered drinks, talked about childhood, about family, about dreams. He asked about her fashion work, genuinely curious. When she mentioned fabric dyeing and hand stitching, he leaned in, completely focused. He didn't interrupt. He didn't shift the conversation to himself. He listened. She asked about his work too. Technology, startups, clean energy. He explained things without sounding like he was lecturing. She understood maybe half, but liked the way he spoke about progress like it was personal. Midway through the conversation, he reached across the table to pass her the last croissant. His fingers brushed hers, softly, intentionally. Her breath hitched. He didn't apologize, didn't pull away. He just held the moment, not asking, not demanding, just being there. She looked down at their hands. then up at him. His gaze didn't waver. "I haven't done this in a long time," she said quietly. "Then we'll go slow." She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have a complicated life. Then let me understand it." Outside the cafe, the wind had picked up. She wrapped her coat tighter, and he walked her to the subway entrance. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "I have a busy week," she said honestly. "I can wait." She paused, then added, "I don't need rescuing." "I'm not here to rescue you," he said. "I'm just here." And that was it. No pressure, no performance. Just a man who didn't flinch at her truth. That night, she told the girls she met someone kind. Nova asked, "Is he tall?" Luna asked, "Does he like pancakes?" Soleil smiled. "Let's find out." By the third coffee, Soleil stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. Soren Vale kept showing up, not with extravagant gestures or grand declarations, but with presence, with reliability, with questions that made her feel like her thoughts mattered, not just her smile. They met weekly, sometimes at the cafe, sometimes at the park near her apartment. No pressure, no assumptions. He never asked to come up, never pushed for more. And in that quiet restraint, she found herself wanting to open doors she thought were sealed shut. One Friday they sat on a bench under a tree, watching Nova and Luna chase pigeons and laugh like the world couldn't touch them. Soleil sipped from her paper cup. "You know I'm not some hidden heiress, right?" Soren chuckled. "I figured. I live in a 2-bedroom with peeling paint and windows that don't close all the way. I'm a single mom, a waitress most days, a designer when I'm lucky. My entire wardrobe fits in one suitcase." He turned to her slowly. "And you think that makes you less worthy of love?" She met his eyes, but didn't answer. "Let me guess," he continued. "The last man who said he loved you made you feel like you had to earn it." Soleil's fingers tightened around her cup. "I'm not that man," Soren said, his voice low and steady. "I don't need perfect. I don't need polished. I just need real." Soleil blinked fast, swallowing back the burn in her throat. "You say that now. I'll say it again tomorrow." She looked away before her face betrayed her. "It's not just me you'd be taking on." He watched the girls with a soft smile. "I see that. And I'm not running." Later that week, he dropped off a sketchbook at her doorstep. No message, just a sticky note that read, "For when the inspiration returns." She hadn't told him she stopped sketching. The next day she opened it and started drawing again. Dresses, blazers, silhouettes that curved like freedom. A line of clothing made for women like her, strong, resilient, quiet fighters. And for the first time in years, she didn't just imagine survival. She imagined success. On a quiet Tuesday, she invited him to meet the girls properly. Not in passing, not at the park, at home. She scrubbed the apartment top to bottom, reorganized the pantry, burned a scented candle she'd been saving for 3 years. When he knocked, Nova answered the door wearing a tutu and rain boots. Soren crouched to her level. "I'm Soren." She eyed him. "Do you know how to braid?" "Not yet." "Mom says learning is important." "Then I better get practicing." Luna peeked from behind the couch. "Do you like cartoons?" "I do." "Even the boring ones?" "Especially the boring ones." That sealed it. By the end of the night, he'd been invited to a tea party, lost 2 rounds of candy, land, and promised to come back with strawberry ice cream the following Saturday. As Soleil stood by the sink washing dishes, Soren appeared behind her, drying the bowls. "You don't have to," she started. "I want to." She handed him a spoon. "They like you. They're incredible. They make it hard to hide." He glanced at her. "Are you trying to hide?" She shook her head. "No, not anymore." The silence between them settled into something soft. He set the last bowl down, turned, and gently tucked a damp curl behind her ear. "I like your world," he said. "It's real." And in that kitchen, with mismatched plates and flickering lights, she felt seen in a way she hadn't since before her wedding. Not for her past, not for her scars, but for her now. It happened the way real moments often do, quietly, without fanfare. They'd been walking for nearly an hour. No destination, just blocks and conversation. The spring air was soft against the skin, and the scent of fresh bread drifted from a corner bakery. Soleil had just finished telling Soren about her final year in design school. How she'd nearly dropped out after failing a presentation when the projector died. "My professor said it wasn't my work that disappointed him. It was my lack of fight. And did that change anything? Soren asked. She smirked. I took his words personally. Then I graduated with top honors. I believe it. They stopped outside a cozy bookstore cafe. The windows were fogged with warmth. The inside glowed with yellow lights and shelves bursting with dog-eared paperbacks. "Wanted to go in?" he asked. She hesitated. "This used to be my favorite place before life got loud. Let's make it your favorite again." Inside, the barista recognized her. "Soleil, haven't seen you in years." She smiled. "Still hiding out in the poetry section?" "Always," he grinned. They ordered coffee and found a table near the back, surrounded by books that smelled like time. Their drinks came. Soren wrapped his hands around his cup and leaned in. "You light up when you talk about your past." She shook her head. "I don't. I flinch." "No," he said softly. "You glow, like someone who's still standing." She lowered her gaze, suddenly aware of how exposed she felt. Then he reached for her hand. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic. His fingers found hers across the table like they belonged there. She looked up. He didn't say a word. He just waited, patient and calm, for her to decide. She didn't pull away. Her hand settled into his, palm to palm, fingers threading gently, and the silence wasn't awkward. It was full. She spoke first. "Do you do this often?" "No." "Then why me?" He studied her face for a moment. "Because when I look at you, I see someone who's already done the hard part. You survived. You protected your girls. You built a life from scraps. That's the kind of woman worth holding on to." She blinked, then laughed quietly. "You sound like a speech." "It's not," he said. "It's a promise." They walked home together. It wasn't cold, but she still wore his jacket. At her building's entrance, she hesitated, fingers brushing the keys in her pocket. "Good night," she said. "Good night," he echoed. And just before she turned, he stepped closer, not rushing, not demanding, and tilted his head slightly. Their lips met, soft, slow, intentional, not the kind of kiss that demanded answers, the kind that made her forget every question. She melted into him, hands curled into his jacket, her body remembering what it felt like to be wanted without pain. When they pulled apart, she didn't say anything, neither did he. They just looked at each other, breath shared in the space between them. Then she smiled. "Text me when you get home." He nodded. "Count on it." She watched him walk down the block, his hands in his pockets, humming to himself. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't fear what came next. She welcomed it. By the time Soren showed up with a box of strawberries and pancake mix on a Saturday morning, the girls had already asked if he was their new neighbor, a magic uncle, or just someone who liked showing up with food. Soleil smiled, arms crossed in the doorway. "You brought the exact brand they love." He held up the box. "I did my homework." Inside, Luna took the lead. "We like triangle pancakes, not circles. Triangles taste better." Soren bowed. "Your wish is my culinary challenge." They cooked together. Soleil whisked. Soren flipped. The girls added blueberries and declared themselves official taste testers. It became a tradition. Every Saturday morning, he showed up, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with paint for crafts, once with a mini telescope because Nova said she wanted to see the moon better. He never overstepped, never acted like he belonged. He earned it. Luna made him tea from an old plastic teapot. Nova sat beside him on the couch while he helped her untangle the laces in her worn sneakers. "Most people rush the knots," he told her. "You have to go slow. Otherwise you break the threads." She nodded, like he'd just unlocked a universe. Soleil watched from the kitchen, a dish towel in her hand, heart caught somewhere between awe and fear. She had grown used to being alone. Now there was someone folding himself into her rhythm like he'd always been part of it. They went to the zoo, the library, the art museum. On weekends he didn't travel for work. He made sure he was present. At first, Soleil expected it to fade. A part of her waited for the excuse, the exit, the reveal. But it never came. Instead, he asked about their favorite bedtime stories. He built a pillow fort taller than the couch. He learned how Luna liked her sandwiches cut, 2 triangles, crust removed. And he remembered Nova's aversion to loud noises. He carried headphones just in case. One afternoon, Soleil walked into the girls' room to find Soren kneeling beside Nova, showing her how to build a miniature tower out of recycled boxes. His tie was askew, and Luna had taped a sticker to his cheek. "You're gonna need stronger glue," he told Nova. "You're gonna need a helmet," Luna chimed, diving from the bed. He caught her mid-air and spun her in a circle. Soleil leaned in the doorway, unable to stop the smile tugging at her lips. He caught her looking and grinned. "She flies. I survive." That night, after the girls were asleep, Soleil made tea. They sat on the balcony, the city humming below. She turned to him. "Why are you really here, Soren?" He didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Because you're worth showing up for. It's not just me. I know, you're building something. With them. With us." He looked at her, voice steady. "And I want to keep building." She sipped her tea, heart pounding. They've never had a man stay longer than a weekend. He reached over, brushing her hand. "Then let's make this the first time they do." She didn't respond with words. Instead, she laid her head on his shoulder. And for the first time in her life, silence felt safe. It started with a rainstorm, not dramatic. Just steady enough to cancel the outdoor movie night the girls had begged for all week. Soleil lit candles instead, pulled out an old projector and played cartoons against the living room wall while thunder hummed gently in the distance. Soren was on the floor with Luna in his lap and Nova resting against his side, both giggling at a talking raccoon in a superhero cape. Soleil stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching them, not like a visitor, but like someone realizing her home had slowly begun to feel full. After the girls fell asleep, curled together under one blanket, Soren helped her carry them to bed. He adjusted their pillows, kissed Luna's forehead, and whispered something into Nova's ear that made her smile even in sleep. When he turned to leave, Soleil caught his hand. "Stay," she said softly. Soren paused. Her voice didn't shake. She didn't rush the word. It wasn't an invitation out of loneliness. It was something else, something that had waited 5 years to be said on her terms. "Are you sure?" he asked, eyes locked to hers. She nodded. "I'm not broken, but I'm still healing. Us, it has to be slow, honest, intentional." He stepped closer. "It always was." She guided him to her bedroom. The room was simple, clean sheets, folded laundry on a chair, a single photo of her daughters on the nightstand. There was no perfume on display, no silk robe hanging on the door. Just her, and that was enough. He stood near the window while she closed the door, the soft light from the hallway casting gold across his skin. "I'm not afraid," she said. "I'd never want to be someone you had to fear." She reached for the hem of her shirt and pulled it over her head slowly. Her hands trembled slightly, not from shame, but from the weight of letting someone in after so long. His eyes never wandered. He wasn't rushing. He was watching her, seeing her. She stepped closer, standing in front of him, in nothing but cotton underwear and confidence that had taken years to rebuild. Soren ran a finger along her shoulder, tracing a faint stretch mark. He leaned in and kissed it, whispering, "This is power." She exhaled. Tension left her chest. Her hands found the buttons of his shirt, undoing them one at a time, revealing the man beneath the suit, the man who hadn't just shown up, but stayed. When they kissed, it wasn't urgent. It was reverent. His hands cupped her face, her back, her waist, like he was afraid to press. Too hard, as if she were something rare, not fragile, but precious. When he laid her down, he did so with care. Their bodies moved with a rhythm that wasn't choreographed. No rush, no hesitation. Just the slow, deliberate language of two people meeting where words weren't enough. He didn't ask her to be quiet. He didn't ask her to perform. He kissed her like each breath belonged to her first. She cried, not from pain, but from the intimacy of being fully seen. No makeup, no lights, no illusion, just her. He moved inside her with depth, not force. Each stroke patient, each moment laced with emotion. The kind of connection she'd never known existed. He whispered to her, voice thick with feeling. "You are not ruined." She gripped his shoulders, her legs wrapped around him, heart pounding. "You are not a burden," he said, burying his face in her neck. Tears streamed down her temples into the pillow. "You are the most powerful woman I've ever touched." And she believed him, because he said it with his hands, with his lips, with every inch of his presence. They stayed like that long after the storm passed. their bodies tangled, skin damp with warmth and whispers. He held her close, his breath steady against her shoulder. No promises, no fairy tales, just truth. When morning came, sunlight spilled across the floor. Soleil lay awake, head on his chest, listening to the calm rhythm of his breathing. She felt full, not just loved, but safe. And that, she realized, was the rarest thing of all. The knock wasn't loud, just firm enough to interrupt the hum of her sewing machine. Soleil stood in her small studio, surrounded by half-finished designs, fabric bolts stacked. In corners, a dress form in the center wearing her latest sketch brought to life. The girls were at school. Soren was on a business trip in Seattle. The world was quiet, until now. She wiped her hands on a towel and opened the door. Her breath caught. Phoenix. He stood in the hallway like a memory that had refused to stay buried. Thinner than before, dressed in an overpriced suit that hung loose on his frame. The smugness she remembered was still there, though it had dulled into something almost hollow. "Didn't expect you to be thriving," he said, eyes sweeping the room. She didn't move. "What do you want?" "I heard some things," he said, stepping past her before she could stop him. "Soren Vale, tech royalty. Looks like you traded up." Soleil shut the doors slowly. Her hands were calm, but her heart kicked. "I didn't trade anything," she said. He picked up a spool of thread from the table, rolled it between his fingers. "Funny. You vanish for 5 years, no calls, no word. Then I find out you're living in Brooklyn with 2 little girls who look a whole lot like me." She stepped in front of him. "They're not your props." He smiled without humor. "But they're mine. Biologically. You don't get to say that now. I've got rights." "No, Phoenix, you don't. You gave those up the night you walked away." He tilted his head. "Correction, the night I wasn't told anything. You would have ignored it like everything else. But now," he said, voice lowering, "now there's money involved, a name, headlines. You're marrying into the front page, and I think we need to talk about custody." She blinked, laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You want to talk about being a father? You slapped me on our wedding night. I was 6 weeks pregnant. You disappeared before I even got the ultrasound results. You think you get to march in now, years later, because it finally matters to you? They're my kids." "They're not your kids," she snapped. "They're my daughters. You don't get to show up with a cheap suit and a sense of entitlement and pretend that counts." He stepped closer. "Don't forget who I am." She didn't flinch. "I haven't. That's why you're not welcome here." He smirked. "We'll see what the courts say." The moment he left, she locked the door, chest tight. Then she grabbed her phone and called Soren. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, love, everything okay?" "No," she whispered. He showed up. Soren's voice shifted instantly. "Where?" "My studio." "He knows." "Did he threaten you?" "Custody. He wants custody." There was a pause. "Then let's crush him." By morning, it wasn't just a threat. It was a letter, delivered by courier, signed and stamped by Phoenix's attorney. Soleil held the envelope with shaking hands, seated at the edge of her bed, while Nova and Luna ate cereal in the kitchen, oblivious to the storm brewing just behind the hallway door. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. She knew what it was, a declaration of war dressed in legal formality. She dialed Soren. He was already on his way. An hour later, he walked into the apartment, still in his flight clothes, a laptop under one arm, his expression unreadable. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Just tired of being tested." He handed her a cup of coffee. "We'll make it stop." Soleil leaned into him, forehead against his chest. "He's not just trying to scare me. He's doing it for control. Power. He wants a seat at the table he abandoned." Soren nodded. "Then we take the table away." Within 48 hours, a full legal team was assembled. Not one lawyer. 4. A family law expert, a child advocacy specialist, a reputation consultant, and a courtroom strategist whose resume included turning entire custody battles into cautionary tales. Soren spared no expense. He didn't do it to impress her. He did it to protect her. Phoenix's lawyers filed swiftly. The claims stated paternal rights, deliberate alienation, and financial interest in the welfare of the children. It was all noise, but noise backed by legal backing becomes dangerous if not countered with equal force. The team dug into Phoenix's past, every missed payment, every bar fight, swept under the rug, every whisper of rehab, every sealed charge. There were dozens, some small, some damaging. Meanwhile, Soleil was coached on how to stay steady, not just in the courtroom, but in the public eye, because Phoenix didn't want fatherhood. He wanted leverage. "He thinks this will embarrass me," she said one night. Soren looked up from the case file. "Then let's make sure it embarrasses him." They held strategy sessions after the girls went to sleep, reviewed evidence, built timelines, gathered witness statements, nurses, friends from design school, even Mrs. Delacroix from the tailor shop. Phoenix's lawyer tried to pressure them into a private settlement. Soren declined. The headlines began to circulate. Ex-husband of designer accuses tech billionaire of custody interference. Twin girls caught in custody tug-of-war between real estate heir and tech mogul. Soleil ignored the noise. She focused on truth. But the girls started to notice. One afternoon, Nova walked into the room with a tablet in her hand. "Mom, who's this man saying he's our dad?" Soleil took a deep breath. "That's someone who helped create you, but didn't stay to raise you. Is he coming here?" "No, he's not welcome." Nova stared at her. "Then why's he saying we belong to him?" Soleil kneeled beside her. "Because some people think being related means owning something. But love isn't ownership, baby. It's action." Luna peeked from the hallway. "Does that mean Soren's our real dad?" Soleil hesitated, then smiled. "It means he shows up every day. That's what counts." Later that night, when she told Soren what the girls said, he didn't say anything right away. Instead, he walked to the kitchen, pulled out a drawer, and brought back 2 bracelets he'd been keeping for months, woven with beads in their favorite colors, initials tucked between stars. "I was waiting for the right time," he said. Soleil's eyes filled. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." The morning of the first court appearance, Soleil wore a simple navy dress, no jewelry. Her hair was pulled into a bun, her face calm. But her hands? They trembled just beneath the surface. Soren reached over in the car and held one. "Whatever happens," he said, "we walk in as truth. He walks in as noise." She nodded. But the moment they stepped into the courthouse lobby, cameras clicked. Reporters hovered. Microphones reached. "Soleil, is it true you hid the children for 5 years? Soren, are you interfering in a custody case to protect your public image? Is this about money or legacy?" They didn't answer. They walked through, hand in hand, flanked by attorneys. Phoenix stood at the top of the stairs in a gray suit and sunglasses. He smirked when he saw them, the same way he had smirked years ago, right before calling her ugly on their wedding night. But this time she didn't look away. Inside the courtroom, the judge reviewed preliminary motions. Phoenix's lawyers pushed for temporary visitation, claimed emotional distress, accused Soleil of alienating the minors from their biological father. Soren's team was ready. They presented a timeline of Phoenix's absence, hospital records from the night of the slap, proof of 0 financial support, statements from pediatricians showing Soren's involvement. But then Soren did something unexpected. He asked to speak. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Vale, you're not required to testify." "I understand, Your Honor, but I'd like to clarify something for the court." Permission was granted. He stood, calm, controlled. "My name is Soren Vale. I'm not here as a tech executive. I'm not here as a billionaire. I'm here as the man who showed up for those girls every weekend, every school play, every scraped knee." He turned toward Phoenix. "And I'm not trying to take someone's place. I simply filled the silence he left behind." Phoenix snorted. Soren didn't flinch. "I never asked to be their father. But when Luna cried at night, I held her. When Nova was scared of thunderstorms, I sat on the floor beside her bed. When their mother was working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, I brought over groceries and stayed to help with homework." He looked at the judge again. "So if this is about who showed up late, he wins. But if this is about who stayed, I think I've made my case." The courtroom was silent. Even Phoenix's lawyers didn't speak for a beat. Then they regrouped. They tried to pivot, arguing that biology should matter more than emotional attachment. But the judge wasn't swayed. Before the session ended, the judge denied Phoenix's emergency request for visitation and ordered a child psychologist to interview both girls. Outside the courtroom, Soleil exhaled for the first time in hours. "You didn't have to say all that," she whispered. "I didn't plan to," Soren replied. "But I meant every word." Later that night, As Soleil tucked Nova into bed, her daughter looked up and said, "Soren talks like you draw. Soft and real." Soleil smiled. "Yeah, he really does." The day the girls were scheduled to meet with a court-appointed psychologist, Soleil braided Nova's hair twice, undoing it the first time because her fingers were shaking too badly. "Mom," Nova said gently, "it doesn't have to be perfect." Soleil kissed her temple. "I know, but you deserve to feel good." At the courthouse, a quiet room was set aside for the meeting. Toys lined one corner, a stack of coloring books in another. The therapist was kind-eyed, soft-voiced, and well-prepared. She smiled at the girls as they entered. "Hi, Nova. Hi, Luna. I'm just here to talk to you both. No tests, no needles, just crayons and questions." Nova sat down quietly. Luna climbed into a chair backward. Outside the room, Soleil waited with Soren. She didn't pace. She just sat still, hands clasped in her lap like she was holding on to air. "She'll ask about their feelings," Soren said softly. "Their memories. Who makes them feel safe?" Soleil nodded. "They know who shows up." An hour passed. Then 90 minutes. When the door finally opened, Nova was holding a drawing. Luna had glitter on her cheek. The psychologist looked at Soleil and smiled. They were honest, brave, very clear. Soleil swallowed. "Did they say anything hard to hear?" "They spoke about joy more than pain," she replied. And when asked who tucks them in at night, Luna said, "Soren, because he reads in the silly voice." Soleil laughed once, shaky but real. The therapist handed over her report. "This will go directly to the judge, but off the record, your daughters know exactly who loves them." Court resumed the next week. Phoenix had arrived in a tailored suit and fresh haircut. His lawyer adjusted his tie before they entered, whispering strategy. The media buzzed again, but not as loud this time. People were starting to see through the show. Inside, the judge reviewed the psychologist's findings, flipping slowly through the report. When asked if either child expressed desire to see Phoenix, the answer was a firm no. Then came the final hearing. Phoenix insisted on speaking. He walked to the stand and painted a picture of regret. A man who'd made mistakes, who wanted a second chance. He teared up at the right moments, referred to missed birthdays and lost time, claimed he'd found faith and wanted to do right by his children. But when the judge asked, "What are their favorite colors?" Phoenix blinked. Silence. "Who's their pediatrician?" The judge continued. More silence. "What's the name of their school?" Phoenix swallowed hard. I don't remember." "You don't know," the judge corrected. He turned to Soleil. "Mrs. Alden, do the girls wish to make a statement?" She hesitated, then nodded. The judge called Nova first. She walked in slowly, gripping the hem of her dress, and sat in the witness chair that seemed far too big for her small frame. The clerk swore her in. Then the judge leaned forward. "Nova, do you know why you're here?" She nodded. "To talk about who my daddy is." The courtroom held its breath. "Do you know this man?" the judge asked, gesturing toward Phoenix. Nova looked at him. Her voice didn't waver. "He was mean to Mommy. He went away. I don't know him." The judge nodded gently. "And who do you know as your dad?" Nova smiled. "Soren. He makes pancakes shaped like stars. He smells like cookies, and he sings out loud even when it's not good." The courtroom softened. The judge nodded again. "Thank you, Nova. You've been very brave." Luna didn't wait for her name to be called. She marched forward, climbed up beside her sister, and grabbed the mic. "He built our fort," she shouted, "and he fixed Nova's shoelaces. And one time, I had a bad dream, and he didn't laugh." The judge chuckled. "That sounds like someone who takes good care of you." Soleil covered her mouth with both hands. Soren sat frozen, trying to blink away emotion that had crept up faster than he expected. Phoenix didn't speak again. There was no rebuttal, nothing left to argue. The judge called for a short recess. When they returned, the verdict was delivered swiftly. Full physical and legal custody is granted to the mother, Miss Soleil Alden. The court finds no credible basis to support the petitioner's claim for visitation or shared custody. He paused. As for Mr. Vale, while not a biological parent, the court acknowledges his role in the children's upbringing and the emotional stability he has provided. Should future guardianship or formal step-parent status be pursued, this court would be inclined to support it. The gavel dropped. Case closed. Outside the courthouse, Soleil didn't speak to the reporters. Neither did Soren. But the girls? They ran out holding hands, Luna yelling, "We won!" Nova grinned up at her mother. "Can we get donuts now?" Soleil laughed through her tears. "Yes, and ice cream. And whatever else you want." Later that night, while Soren tucked them in, Luna whispered, "You can just call us your kids now." He paused. "Is that what you want?" Nova nodded. "You're already our dad. Might as well say it." Soren kissed their foreheads. "Then it's official." Soleil watched from the doorway, hand pressed to her heart. She didn't need permission, but hearing it from her daughters? That was everything. The wedding wasn't extravagant, but it was unforgettable. It took place on a hillside vineyard in Napa Valley, just past sunset. The sky stretched wide and open, streaked with gold turning indigo. White drapes fluttered between wooden beams. Lanterns glowed from tree branches. A breeze whispered through the vines. There were only 40 guests. No media, no sponsors, no press releases, just chosen family, quiet joy, and the sound of live strings in the background. Soleil walked down the aisle alone, not because she didn't have someone to give her away, because no one was taking her. She was arriving on her own terms. Her dress flowed like water, made from fabric she had designed herself. Hand-stitched lace wrapped around her arms like armor. She wore her natural curls pinned up, a single gold comb nestled above her left ear. Her daughters led the way, barefoot in white dresses with sunflower crowns. Luna dropped petals with unbothered chaos, tossing them in all directions. Nova followed behind, more precise, focused, holding her mother's gaze the entire way like she was anchoring her to something steady. And then there was Soren, waiting at the altar, not a trace of nerves, just admiration. He didn't blink as she approached. He just breathed like she'd knocked the wind from him. They met under an arch built by his hands, oak branches and flowers Soleil had picked herself. The officiant smiled. "Friends, today isn't about starting over. It's about honoring what survived." Everyone settled into stillness. Soleil and Soren turned to face each other, hands entwined. She began. "I never dreamed of being rescued. I dreamed of being met, with honesty, with softness, with strength. You showed up, not to fix me, but to walk beside me. You kissed my stretch marks. You folded my laundry. You braided hair you didn't help grow. I see you. I trust you. I choose you." Soren exhaled through a tight smile, emotion brimming. His voice shook, but he didn't hesitate. "I never thought I'd be enough for a family like this. I wasn't looking for a fairy tale. I was looking for real. And then you appeared, with 2 fearless girls and more. Fire than I knew how to hold. You let me in. You trusted me with your world. And from this day on, I promise to protect it, not because I have to, but because I get to." Soleil blinked fast, fighting the tears. Nova handed over the rings. Luna chimed, "They're shiny." The guests laughed. The officiant continued, "With these rings, you don't just say I love you. You say, I see you, I stand with you, I show up." They exchanged rings with trembling fingers. "You may kiss." Soren didn't wait. He cupped her face gently and kissed her like the first time, slow, full of reverence, like the world had been waiting for this moment. Applause rose. The string quartets swelled. The girls jumped up and down, arms in the air. They were married, but more than that, they were complete. The reception was simple. Long farm tables beneath the open sky, candles flickering, plates full of food that actually tasted like love, not catered perfection, but family recipes Soleil had picked out with care. Toasts came from friends, from Luna, who sang her speech, and from Nova, who stood on a chair and said, "Mom is the strongest person in the whole universe, and Soren knows it." Later, when the stars finally replaced the dusk, Soleil and Soren had their first dance. No practiced routine, just quiet swaying beneath string lights, her head on his shoulder, his hand at the small of her back. He whispered, "You still take my breath." She smiled against his neck. "Good, because I don't plan on letting you catch it." The villa overlooked rows of quiet vines stretching into moonlight. After the last guest departed and the laughter faded into silence, Soleil and Soren returned to the private cottage tucked behind the vineyard. The inside flickered with candlelight, no overhead bulbs, just soft glows, dancing on the walls in shadows that felt more intimate than dark. Soren stood near the fireplace, unbuttoning his shirt slowly, watching her as she slid her heels off one by one. Neither rushed. This wasn't about urgency. This was about reverence. Soleil walked toward him, fingers trailing the collar of her dress, loosening the zipper at her back. He met her halfway. The fabric slid from her shoulders. Lace and satin floated to the floor. She stood bare before him, not just in body, but in truth. All of her. He placed his palms gently on her hips, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. His mouth brushed her collarbone, her neck, her shoulder. Each kiss deliberate, measured. She tilted her chin, eyes fluttering closed as he whispered into her skin. "You've always been more than beautiful. You've been unshakable." She guided him to the edge of the bed, but he stopped her, hands still on her waist. "Let me." He lifted her, cradled her like a vow, laid her down as if she were something rare, deserving of soft landings. When he joined her, his weight pressed into her with purpose, but never possession. Their bodies moved slowly, like a dance long practiced and never forgotten. She arched against him, gasping his name not as a cry, but as a statement of faith. He moved inside her, deep, slow strokes that didn't rush or demand, but reassured. His hands roamed every inch of her. Scars, curves, stretch lines, all treated like sacred terrain. Her breath caught. Her body trembled. But it wasn't from fear. It was from being known. Soren's voice rasped near her ear. "You don't have to prove anything." She wrapped her legs around him tighter, whispered back, I'm just here." They held each other in that rhythm, until neither could remember where one ended and the other began. And when the first waves of climax came, hers first, rolling and raw, she didn't suppress her sounds. She let them echo in the room like declarations. "I survived. I'm still here. I deserve this." He followed, burying his face in her neck, groaning her name like a prayer. Then, stillness. Just breathing. Skin slick, limbs tangled, the fire crackling behind them. He stayed inside her as long as he could, not out of lust but connection. Afterward, he kissed her hand, each finger, and said, "This is everything I never thought I'd have." She looked at him through heavy lashes. "I'm not a fairy tale. You're better." They stayed there, wrapped in each other under the linen sheets. She traced circles over his chest. He ran his fingers through the coils of her hair. And when the fire began to die down, she whispered, "I forgive myself." Soren stilled, then kissed her heart. "You don't need to. You survived. And now, you reign." A tear slipped from the corner of her eye, but this time it was weightless. No shame, no regret, just release. He turned her gently, pulling her against him from behind, wrapping both arms around her waist. Her back pressed to his chest, his breath steady against the curve of her shoulder. They fell asleep like that, interlocked, not chasing wholeness, living it. Morning poured through the sheer white curtains and slow golden ribbons. Soleil stirred first, eyes blinking open to a room that smelled faintly of sandalwood and warmth. The fireplace had gone out sometime during the night, but the heat still lingered. Soren's arm draped over her waist, his breath steady against her shoulder. For a long moment, she didn't move. She simply lay there, listening to the stillness, to the heartbeat beneath her skin, to the quiet confirmation that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She eased out of bed, wrapping herself in one of his button-downs. The cotton hung loosely over her hips, sleeves rolling past her fingers. She padded barefoot across the floor and stepped outside onto the private balcony. Vines stretched out in every direction, kissed by early sun. Her eyes welled, not from sadness, but from a kind of peace she had never tasted before. One that didn't ask for silence. One that didn't demand apology. Just wholeness. She thought about how far she'd come, from the girl in the penthouse bathroom bleeding alone, to the woman standing barefoot in Napa with a wedding band that didn't represent rescue but recognition. Behind her, the screen door slid open. Soren appeared, shirtless, sleep-softened, holding 2 mugs. "Black. 2 sugars," he said, handing one to her. She took it, smiling. "You remember?" "I remember everything about you." They stood in silence, sipping coffee, watching the light stretch across the hills. Then she spoke. "I used to think surviving was enough, that making it through was the prize, but I realize now I was still waiting for permission to feel joy." Soren turned to her, eyes steady. "You never needed permission. But I'm glad you gave it to yourself." She leaned her head on his shoulder. I spent so long carrying shame that wasn't mine, apologizing for someone else's failure. Not anymore. No, she said. Not anymore. Back in the city, the world moved on. But Soleil moved differently, with certainty, with grace, with unapologetic vision. She returned to her studio, sketches blooming from her hands like they'd been waiting for this version of her to exist. Soren built her a better workspace, nothing flashy, just functional, inspiring, hers. Nova and Luna helped paint the walls. Pink streaks showed up where they weren't supposed to, and she left them as reminders. She began building a collection, not just of clothes, but of moments, women who'd been dismissed, silhouettes that told stories, fabrics that hugged curves instead of hiding them. Every piece had a name. Every stitch had a purpose. She called the line Maison Alden. It wasn't about ego. It was about reclamation. She funded the launch herself, with years of saved tips, freelance checks, and Soren's quiet refusal to interfere with a single dime, even when he offered and she declined. They both understood why it mattered. 1 year later, her first collection launched in a rented gallery in Soho. The turnout surprised even her. Old professors, clients from her waitress days, women from shelters, reporters, stylists. The girls wore matching custom dresses and passed out handwritten programs. And when the show ended, the final model walking in a white suit designed to mirror Soleil's own resilience, the crowd stood. Soleil didn't cry on the runway. She saved that for later, when she was alone with her daughters backstage, and Nova whispered, "Mommy, you did it." She hugged them both and whispered back, "We did." 3 months later, the boutique opened. Modest, chic, tucked on a quiet block in Brooklyn. The sign read, Maison Alden, crafted in black iron and mounted on soft brick. Inside, the space was filled with light and soul. Shelves of hand-sewn garments, a mural of Soleil and the girls on the back wall, a lounge corner with books by black female authors and fashion pioneers. Candles burned gently at the window. People came, not just to shop, but to feel something, to hear a story, to see what survival looked like when it turned into art. One evening, Soleil arrived home late after a private fitting. She opened the door to find Soren asleep on the couch, Sol, now 5 months old, resting on his chest, Luna curled up under one arm, and Nova draped across his legs with a sketchpad in hand. She smiled, quietly stepping closer. Her family, her victory. She sat on the armrest and ran a hand gently through Sol's soft curls. He stirred. How'd it go? Sold out the new line. He smirked. You're unstoppable. She leaned down, kissing his cheek. No, love. I'm just finally free. And for once, she didn't need to say another word. The day of the grand opening arrived with sunlight streaming through Brooklyn's tree-lined avenues. No red carpet, no corporate sponsors, no flashing celebrity endorsements. Just a boutique on the corner of Sterling and Carlton, wrapped in purpose, filled with pieces stitched from grit, grace, and survival. Maison Alden. The doors opened at 10. By 10:15, a line had already formed outside. People came from everywhere, not just to shop, but to see the woman behind the name. Soleil stood in the center of it all, wearing a structured blazer. In obsidian silk and wide-leg slacks she had cut and sewn herself. Her hair was pulled back, adorned with gold clips shaped like laurel leaves, a quiet nod to the victory she'd earned. Nova and Luna skipped through the boutique in matching tulle skirts, directing guests like mini curators. Nova handed out flyers. Luna pointed to the dressing rooms like she owned the lease. And then there was Soren, holding Sol in one arm, managing receipts, with the other wearing a navy vest and a look of undeniable pride. "Excuse me," a reporter asked, clipboard in hand. "What does this launch mean to you?" Soleil smiled. "It means I'm no longer asking permission." Permission for what? To take up space, to lead, to exist without apology. The photographer snapped. Click, click, click. Each flash captured not a debut, but a declaration. The boutique wasn't massive, but it had been carefully curated. Near the entrance, mannequins wore her signature collection, each garment named after women in her life who had inspired her fight. Delacroix, Nova, Luna, and the showstopper, Rain, a blood-red trench coat with black-on-black embroidery that told a silent story of resistance. In the back corner, a wall of sketches displayed her earliest drafts, some stained, some creased, all real. She'd left them there on purpose, to remind every woman who walked in that greatness is built from mess, not perfection. There was a moment around midday when Soleil slipped away to the stockroom just to breathe, not because she was overwhelmed, but because she needed a minute to honor the version of herself that once couldn't picture this day. That girl in the bathroom mirror, wedding dress soaked with tears and blood. That mother pacing the apartment at 2 a.m., whispering affirmations through exhaustion. That woman who was told she was too much and not enough, sometimes in the same breath. She wasn't gone. She had evolved. And she deserved this moment too. A knock at the door. Nova peeked in. "They're asking for you at the front. Someone wants to order a custom piece for a documentary premiere." Soleil smiled. "Be right there." She stood, smoothed her pants, and walked back out into her life. By evening, a toast was made. Glasses clinked. Customers lingered. The boutique had sold out of 2 full racks. Luna danced to music no one else could hear. Nova stacked inventory tags like they were currency. Soren slipped his arm around Soleil's waist. "You built this with your help," she whispered. "No," he replied. "I just showed up. You built it with your bare hands." She leaned into him. "I used to think I needed someone to save me. And now, I know I needed someone who believed I could save myself." They kissed, soft, quiet, certain. Behind them, the neon sign in the window buzzed gently. Maison Alden Power, softly worn, boldly made. 2 years after her world had shifted for the last time, Soleil Alden stood at the head of a dinner table that wasn't fancy, but full. It was a Saturday. Nova had just finished her science project, complete with sparkles and string lights. Luna had turned a cardboard box into a spaceship. Saul, now toddling and full of mischief, had somehow figured out how to open the fridge. And Soren? He was at the stove, apron tied awkwardly over his chest, trying to keep pancakes from burning while listening to Luna recite planet facts. Soleil leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes soft. This wasn't chaos. This was her peace. Dinner that night was nothing extravagant: eggs, fruit, pancakes, and laughter. Luna dropped a strawberry on the floor and blamed Saul. Nova rolled her eyes. Soren pretended to be offended and threatened to ban both girls from syrup for life. They argued. They forgave. They laughed again. And Soleil soaked it all in. After the dishes were cleared, the kids ran to the couch for their Saturday movie tradition. Soleil lingered in the kitchen, rinsing the last of the syrup from a plate. Soren came up behind her, arms slipping around her waist. "Still think I make weird pancakes?" he asked. "They're oddly shaped," she said with a smile. "But they taste like home." He kissed the top of her head. Saul squealed in the background. The movie began to play. The room smelled of cinnamon and lemon soap. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, Nova curled up with a sketch pad, Luna half asleep. With a flashlight in hand, and Saul clinging to a stuffed giraffe, Soleil and Soren sat on the balcony. They didn't need music. They didn't need wine. They just needed each other. Soleil rested her head on his shoulder. "I used to wonder what love was supposed to feel like. And now..." She closed her eyes. "It feels like this." He exhaled, pulling her closer. They sat in silence for a while, watching city lights flicker like distant stars. Then Soleil said, "I want to do something." Soren turned. "What?" "I want to write a book. Not about fashion, about everything. What I've learned, what I survived, what I built." He smiled. "You should. I want the girls to have something one day. Something that reminds them they come from a long line of women who fought to be heard. You'd write it beautifully." She took his hand. "You made me believe I could." A few weeks later, she began. During Saul's naps, after the boutique closed, on Sundays when Soren took the girls to the park. She wrote about the slap. She wrote about the silence. She wrote about how you can grieve the life you thought you deserved and still build one better from the ruins. She called it Not Broken, Becoming. And when it was published, the dedication read, "For Nova, Luna, and Saul, so you know what strength looks like. And for Soren, so you know what you helped me find again." Time moved gently after that. The boutique expanded. She opened a second location downtown, trained young designers, offered scholarships to single mothers in fashion school. The logo became iconic, Maison Alden, worn by women who carried stories on their shoulders and didn't apologize for the weight. But even as success grew louder, Soleil stayed rooted in the quiet. She still braided Luna's hair before bed, still corrected Nova's math homework, still danced barefoot in the kitchen with Saul on her hip. And one spring evening, as they all stood outside the boutique's new flagship location, photographers, lining the sidewalk, a reporter asked her, "How does it feel to be the face of modern resilience?" Soleil adjusted the strap on her heels, looked down at her son reaching for her hand, and smiled. "I'm not the face," she said. "I'm just one voice. There are millions more like me." Behind her, Soren wrapped an arm around her waist. Nova and Luna held the ribbon. Saul reached for the scissors and tried to eat them. The flashbulbs burst. The crowd cheered. And in the center of it all, Soleil Alden didn't shrink. She stood tall, not because she wanted to be seen, but because she finally saw herself. There's a stillness that comes with full circle moments, not silence. Stillness, like the exhale after a long climb, where you finally stand at the top, not just to look back, but to realize you've survived. Soleil Alden sat in the private fitting room of her flagship boutique, a soft linen, robe around her shoulders, makeup barely there, hair swept into a crown of curls. Outside, the city buzzed. Inside, it was quiet enough to hear herself think. A little girl, no older than Luna had been when all this began, clutched a book in her tiny hands, wide-eyed, nervous, hopeful. Soleil recognized that look. She'd worn it once too. The girl held out the book, not broken, becoming. "Can you sign it?" she whispered. Soleil smiled, taking the pen. As she scribbled her name across the inside cover, she paused, then added a message in neat, steady handwriting. "You are never ruined, only rising. Love, Soleil." The girl blinked, then wrapped her arms around her waist without asking. Soleil knelt down, hugging her back. "Thank you," the girl whispered. "You're welcome. Now go be great." As the child was ushered back to her mother, Soleil stood, her eyes landing on the boutique's glass doors. The afternoon light filtered in, and through it, she saw her daughters just outside on the front patio. Nova and Luna twirling barefoot in matching white sundresses, their laughter ringing out like music no one could silence. Saul, now nearly 3, spun in dizzy circles chasing after them, his curls bouncing, his giggles contagious. Soleil walked to the threshold. She didn't need to speak. She just watched them move freely, watched them love out loud, watched them live a life she once thought she'd never be strong enough to give them. And she smiled, because the world had called her many things. Too young, too soft, too loud, too late. But she'd proven something. To them, to herself, to every woman watching, scars are not shame. They are crowns, worn by survivors who chose to reign. Her story didn't begin with a love story. It began with a lie disguised as love. A man who tore her down on the night they were meant to build something. A slap that should have silenced her. But instead, it woke her up. What followed wasn't easy. It wasn't glamorous. It was gritty. It was cold. It was full of nights where she doubted she'd make it, mornings where she stared at 2 hungry faces and wondered if love alone could fill an empty fridge. But she never gave up. Not because she had a hero, but because she became her own. And somewhere along the way, when she least expected it, real love did come. Not to rescue, to recognize. Soren Vale didn't save her. He met her, and in meeting her, he showed Nova and Luna what it meant to be loved with consistency, not conditions. They built a family that didn't match on paper, but clicked in the soul. And that was everything. Today, Soleil Alden was not the girl in the rain, holding a bouquet she no longer believed in. She was the woman with ink on her hands, purpose in her steps, and fire in her voice. She was no longer asking for space. She owned it. And as she watched her children laugh in the light she had once fought through, darkness to create, she realized something. The best revenge isn't spite. It's peace. It's power. It's joy earned, not borrowed. It's walking through life not needing anyone to understand your pain, because you've already turned it into something unshakable. As Sol spun and fell into her arms with a giggle, Soleil scooped him up, kissed his cheek and whispered, "You're part of the legacy too, baby boy." Nova ran to her side and took her hand. "We're ready for ice cream. Luna's picking the flavor," she added with a grimace. "She always picks bubblegum," Soleil said with mock dismay. We know, Nova and Saul chimed together. Soren stepped out of the boutique behind them, keys in hand, that crooked smile that still made her breath catch, every time. You good? He asked. Soleil looked at them all, daughters glowing, son laughing, husband steady beside her. I'm more than good, she said. She was whole, not because life had gone according to plan, but because she'd rewritten the ending herself. They walked down the sidewalk together, hand in hand, no camera crew, no audience. Just a family that had once been broken and built something beautiful from the pieces. As they turned the corner, Soleil glanced back one last time. Maison Alden glowed in the window behind her, and the words on the glass etched in gold. She rose. If Soleil's journey touched your heart, if you've ever had to rebuild from pain, if you've ever turned your silence into strength, please don't scroll away just yet. Hit that like button so this story can reach someone who needs to hear that they are not ruined, they are rising. Leave a comment below. Would you have forgiven Phoenix if he came back too late? Or would you have built your empire like Soleil? We read every word, and your voice matters. Subscribe to Love and Twilights for more powerful stories about resilience, redemption, and the kind of love that doesn't fix you, but sees you. And remember, scars aren't signs of failure. They're proof you survived. Until next time, keep rising.